Number 10. Cannibal History Teacher. On August 20th, 1979, civil lawyer Wallace Schwartz received a phone call just after 2 a.m. When he answers, he hears his friend, 38-year-old history teacher Albert Fentress, in a quiet, emotionless tone say that he is going to kill himself because he did something awful, something unthinkable. The chilling story of Albert Fentress shocked and devastated the world, especially the people in Poughkeepsie, New York. The middle school history teacher lured his victim, 18-year-old Paul Masters, into his home. That was when a horrific series of events unfolded. We won't go too far into details, because frankly, it's disturbing. But basically, Fentress held Masters at gunpoint and tied him up in his basement. After subjecting him to brutal torture and sexual assault, he then killed Masters by shooting him in the head. Afterwards, he turned into a cannibal and ate portions of his body. After being arrested, Fentress was ruled insane. He's been institutionalized ever since. But did Albert really lose touch with reality? Or did he know exactly what he did and how to get away with it? Number 9. George Kenney. In 2011, 3 promising young students died mysteriously in the city of Northport, Sarasota County, Florida. Brittany Palumbo, age 17, Marcus Freeman, age 16, and Wesley McKinley, 16, all suffered tragic fates. Palumbo and McKinley took their own lives by hanging themselves. Freeman crashed his car and was fatally injured. The deaths were traced back to one man, and a surprising one, Dr. George Kenney, the principal of Northport High School. Kenney had a keen interest in hypnotism, having studied the subject in 2006. Kenney saw it as a way of helping people with their personal issues. He regularly hypnotized students and staff. By doing so, he was storing up a world of trouble for later. Brittany Palumbo needed help coping with exams. Marcus Freeman wanted to improve his football game. And Wesley McKinley was a keen guitar player. Kenney likely thought he was doing some good by hypnotizing these impressionable young minds. But his lack of qualifications led to the 3 students becoming dangerously disoriented. Kenney worked with a reported 75 students. Some were put under by the school hypnotist more than once. He also taught people how to hypnotize themselves. A connection was later made between Kenney and the deaths, so he was charged with the misdemeanor of hypnosis without a license. The principal was handed a sentence of 1 year's probation. Families of the victims were awarded $200,000 each by the Sarasota County school districts. Kenney himself wasn't pursued in the courts due to Florida law, but was eventually forced out of teaching in 2013. Number 8. Zithika Zizi High School Killings. This extraordinary and shocking story starts with a school field trip back in 1999. Zithika Zizi High School in South Africa was the scene of a horrible shooting. A dispute began when students discovered they'd overpaid for their educational outing. A difference of 30 cents was all it took for trouble to flare up. They wanted their money back, but the school didn't agree. This was wrong, but what happened next was catastrophic. The unhappy students started a riot. They damaged the school principal's car, throwing rocks at the vehicle, then at the library windows when staff shut themselves inside. Things were spiraling out of control. What happened next was horrifying. The principal and other staff members got out guns and started shooting at their own students. A 19-year-old student, Sithembiso Kakwenya, was killed, and 2 others were badly injured. The teacher and the principal were quickly arrested, but they were eventually released on bail. A spokesperson for the education department said it was clearly self-defense, but they can't condone the actions of the teacher and the principal. Number 7. Private school killing. 23-year-old Yu Hagino was a part-time teacher at a private school in Uji, Kyoto Prefecture, Japan. Hagino tutored 12-year-old Sayano Horimoto, but couldn't connect with the student. They didn't get along, with the 6th grader constantly mocking him during their lessons. In December 2005, Hagino found out that he would no longer be teaching Horimoto after her parents complained about him. Upon hearing the news, Hagino became angry. He bought a hammer and 2 large kitchen knives from a hardware store. On Saturday, December 10th, Horimoto showed up for their last exam session. Hagino then got Horimoto alone in a room and locked the door. First, he tried to hit her with the hammer. When that failed, he used the 12-inch or 30-centimeter long knife to stab the schoolgirl 13 times in the chest, neck, and face. After the murder, he called his father and admitted killing the girl. Originally, Hagino was given 18 years in prison, but that was reduced by 3 years in 2009 because Hagino was at diminished capacity at the time of the murder. According to criminal law, diminished responsibility is a potential defense used by criminals who will argue that although they broke the law, they should not be held fully criminally liable for doing so, as their mental functions were diminished or impaired. Number 6. The real Breaking Bad. Our next story raises eyebrows because of its similarity to the hit show Breaking Bad. An IT teacher working in Wales, UK may have taken inspiration from the series about an educator who develops a profitable sideline in Class A drugs. It's a shame that the teacher, McFellen Kowale, didn't learn any lessons from Breaking Bad, which shows that crime doesn't pay. Kowale had certainly made a lot of money from his criminal enterprise, though it didn't last very long. Reports state that his secret laboratory was worth over $1 million when it was busted, and like Breaking Bad's Walter White, Kowale was a clever man. He worked out how to make the cocaine look like it was better stuff than it actually was. Police raided his home in 2014 and the jig was up. Originally, Kowale reportedly tried to pretend the cocaine wasn't his, but since it was found on his property, no one bought it. That said, police commented on the sophistication of his operation, saying that he knew exactly what he was doing. Kowale was sent to prison for 3.5 years. Do you think Kowale was truly inspired by the TV show? Have you seen it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 5. Mr. Meat Cleaver. It started out as a normal day for everyone except the 28-year-old teacher Lu Hongwen. He went to his school in China's central Hunan province, where he had been working for a little over a year, despite the fact that he had a known history of mental illness. On September 30th, 2004, he entered a grade 1 classroom with a meat cleaver and started murdering students. Hongwen then went to another classroom where he held 64 students and teachers hostage for several hours. Hongwen continued his nightmare assault, attacking 4 more teachers. The police arrived shortly after the rampage began. It took some negotiating, but Hongwen finally gave up peacefully. 4 students died, and 9 students and 3 teachers were injured. Later on, Hongwen pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was sent to a mental institute for psychiatric help. Number 4. Ronald Jansen. Ronald Jansen was described as a quiet and withdrawn man. He had been a technical drawing teacher at a high school and was a divorced father of 2 daughters. His ex-wife is in absolute disbelief that he was capable of such vicious acts. But what did Jansen do? In 2017, 18-year-old Annick van Utsel had been cycling home when Jansen forced her into his car at gunpoint. He took her to his house and locked her in his basement cellar for hours. He then beat her to death, tied heavy weights to her body, and then dumped her in the lake. 3 years later, he targeted a young couple that lived next door, Shanna Appletons and Kevin Paulus. Janice shot them and then put them in his car and set fire to it. This time, he wouldn't get away with his crimes. Police arrested him on January 1st, 2010. He confessed to 3 murders, but has been connected to as many as 15 murders dating back to 1991. Jansen is also suspected of committing 20 sexual assaults since 2001. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on October 21, 2011. According to the teacher himself, he'd been following his murderous urges for years. Number 3. Cyanide Teacher. To people that knew him, Mohan Kumar seemed like a normal enough middle-aged guy. Hailing from the state of Karnataka in India, he was a teacher in a primary school. This job probably led folks to believe he was a kind and caring man. Sadly, they couldn't have been more wrong in their assessment. In 2009, he would get a deadly nickname, Cyanide Mohan. Over a period of 5 years, Kumar operated as a cold and calculating killer. 20 or more women fell victim to his poisonous personality. And by poisonous, we mean that literally. Cyanide was Kumar's weapon of choice. He first came into contact with the substance while working with a goldsmith. Apparently, cyanide powder is used to polish gold, an effective but dangerous method of getting jewelry to look its best. And Kumar was going to use these details to shocking effect. He targeted vulnerable women who didn't have a lot of money and lacked self-confidence. Kumar was cunning. He posed as a government worker and then showed romantic interest in his future victims. To these unsuspecting women, he seemed like a catch. So when he proposed, they must have thought their dreams were about to come true. On June 17, 2009, a 22-year-old Anitha Muya was reported missing by her family. Muya was one of the unlucky women Kumar targeted. She fell in love with him and agreed to marry him. Kumar suggested eloping. On their way to the temple for the ceremony, Kumar handed Muya a pill. He told her it was a contraceptive and that she should swallow it in the bus stop toilet. What he hadn't told her was that the pill was cyanide. The poor woman died an awful death. Meanwhile, Kumar simply returned to the place they were staying, collected the victim's jewelry, and fled the scene. Muya was just one of many victims that suffered the same fate. All were found dead from poison in public restrooms. It took authorities a long time to work out that something was going on. Eventually, Kumar was tracked down through phone records, where it was discovered that Kumar had multiple wives and children who were all kept secret from one another. In order to support them, he was pawning the jewelry he stole from his victims. He was given the death sentence in 2013, but is currently still in prison. Safely behind bars, Kumar is unable to hurt anyone else, but his disturbing legacy makes headlines to this day. Number 2. Schoolyard Crush. In 2016, a school crush turned deadly in this shocking case from the city of Ranchi in India. A 12-year-old boy named Binay Mahato was in love with the 11-year-old daughter of teacher Nezma Khatun. Mahato was later found seriously injured outside the residential apartments of Sapphire International School. He showed signs of having been beaten, plus other gruesome injuries. Tragically, Mahato died after he was found. So, what happened? Reportedly, the teacher's son invited him to Khatun's apartment for a meal and confronted Mahato over his infatuation with Khatun's daughter. Over dinner, an argument broke out when Binay refused to stop hanging out with the teacher's daughter. The son attacked Mahato. He covered his mouth and punched him several times. He then pushed him into the wall, at which point he hit his head. Khatun wasn't involved in the struggle. She claimed she and her daughter were asleep in the other room at the time. It was the commotion that woke her up. Seeing Mahato lying there dead led to an appalling and quick decision. With the apartment on the first floor, the panicked family pushed the body off a balcony. While the crime doesn't appear to have been witnessed by anyone, there was heartbreaking closed-caption television footage of Mahato on his way to the apartments. Police caught up with Khatun and arrested her and took the whole family into custody. Number 1. Heinz Schmidt. A normal morning at school turned into a horrific scene after a recently let-go teacher opened fire on students and staff. This happened in 1913 at the St. Mary's Catholic School in Bremen, Germany. Heinz Schmidt hadn't taught at St. Mary's, but he seemed to have revenge on his mind when he arrived with a briefcase full of guns. Schmidt's father had passed away the day before, and he blamed Jesuits, an order of the Catholic Church, for his bereavement. As you can already tell, Schmidt was a highly disturbed individual, and he'd been let go from his former job as a teacher due to his mental state. All hell broke loose when he went to the school that day. Having narrowly missed a teacher, he then entered a classroom full of girls aged between 6 and 7. The gunman shot 2 dead, with others injured. Another lost her life when she fell downstairs trying to escape Schmidt. During the insanity, he also shot and wounded the janitor and another teacher. He then took potshots out of a window, causing further injuries. Schmidt was eventually tackled and nearly met his end at the hands of an angry crowd as he was escorted out of the building by police. As things stood, Schmidt was placed in an asylum. He left behind a trail of devastation, with 5 girls dead in the attack. The funeral caused such a stir that gun laws were changed as a result of the shooting. Schmidt lived the rest of his life in the asylum, succumbing to disease and dying in 1932. Thanks for watching. Are there any teachers gone wrong you think we should have included on our list? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on The Bad Badger.